Welcome back to the Something in the Wilderness podcast, where we discuss each of Andrew McMahon's songs throughout his career. Before the New Friends tour and leading up to the SoCo reunion in Vegas, I did an interview with Josh Partington and did a few more themed Something Corporate episodes that I deemed Something Corporate Fall. Well, we're going to return to the topic because it's very timely. We have a guest today that went to one of the recent shows in Anaheim, and we're going to talk about a song from Something Corporate. So we're kind of getting a twofer here today. But now that we're back on song episodes, after a few bonus episodes recently, I do have Steve Jones from Concert Pipeline here today, who has a podcast of his own, and he is here to talk about a specific song and, of course, the recent concert. So welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
I know that you've interviewed Andrew a handful of times, right, over the years?
Yeah, I was doing mental math right before we got together, and I want to say it's at least 6 times over the years that we've interviewed, the first being in 2004.
Wow, going way back. So
Yeah.
I don't even have to ask you when you entered the fan base in terms of like which project you came in on, because that's pretty obvious. And it's been from listening to your podcast actually. So how did you get started with Concert Pipeline? Like how did that all transpire?
Oh, I've been interviewing bands since I was like a kid, and I used to do it as a public access TV show with friends in Napa, California, and it's just always been this thing that was with me. And then so it kind of melded into Concert Pipeline when I was in college as a public access TV show. Then I started a family after that and kind of took a break, and then kind of brought it back actually 10 years ago this month as
Wow.
a podcast. And haven't slowed down. I've been doing it ever since.
Wow. The
Yeah,
podcast has been around for 10 years.
yeah,
You,
yeah.
you don't hear that too often. That's pretty amazing. But how did you get introduced to Andrew's music anyway?
A buddy introduced him to me actually, and I had an interesting experience. And the first time I heard something corporate was actually on live TV doing my public access TV show back in probably 2002, and
Okay.
we were supposed to have an interview with him for his show in January 2003, and it fell through.
Mm.
The publicist didn't make it happen anyway. But that was still my first time seeing Andrew McMahon live, and I mean, I got really into it really from the first time that I saw him live, and I had a video
Hmm.
pass that I got through the opening band, Juliana Theory, on that tour, and it was just an amazing performance where at the Fillmore in San Francisco, and Andrew started out with this spoken poem, and I should have remembered which poem it was, but he came and he sat down on the side of the stage
Hmm.
like a foot from me. I had a big camera on my shoulder, and then they just went into the rock show, and it was incredible.
That is so
Yeah,
cool. That's a
yeah,
pretty special experience. And the fact that you've been able to interview him so many times is pretty special too. So I think you guys are on a first name basis. I know I found out who you were because we were on the same Camp Wilderness live stream. And Andrew told you something really cool on that live stream a couple months back. Why don't you share what that was and how it pertains to what we're talking about today?
yeah. And I think you saw my facial expressions
Yeah.
in that live stream because. We have this commonality, right? In that Andrew McMahon is our favorite musician, and
Hmm.
it's one thing to kind of have be on that first name basis that, as you mentioned, with someone whose music you really respect and who you grew up with and is such a part of your life. But it's another thing for that to kind of be reciprocated. And so what Andrew said in that fan live stream was that he was using clips from our first interview from 2004 in this video montage that the band was something corporate was coming out to at their Vegas reunion show, and my mind was just blown for a
Yeah.
number of reasons.
It's so incredible. I mean, to be part of that moment in something corporate history now.
Yeah, and they use the video again. I know we'll talk about the concert, but they use the video again this past weekend at their New Year's Eve shows in Anaheim. So it was really cool to have my daughter there and like for her to see her dad on the big screen. It was pretty cool.
That's
Yeah,
incredible. I love that you were able to share that with your daughter. And I love even more that you guys were able to see that in person. So it's one thing to see it on a live stream. It's one thing to hear about it secondhand or get someone's video, but you're actually able to witness that live in person. That's pretty special.
Yeah, and I couldn't be there in Vegas to see it live. I mean, I just couldn't make the trip out to Vegas, and
Hmm.
it was opening duck hunting season, and that's a big hobby of mine. And so I watched the live stream in my car, in the backseat of my car, like and
Oh,
just
really?
yeah, that it was incredible. So
That's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm glad it made the live stream. I remember we were chatting back and forth about that, about whether they would actually do the intro on the live stream, and I'm glad that they did, so you could see it while it was happening. So, or I'll link that clip in the show notes of the intro to their show, so everybody can see what we're talking about there. If anybody wants to check that out. What's also cool is the song we're talking about today. At least at the House of Blues shows in Vegas that I saw, they busted right into the song we're talking about today after the introduction that you were in. It was a pretty magical moment, actually, to me, to have that experience that way, and I'm sure you had a similar experience that we'll talk about. But let's back up just a bit. So 20 years prior, I was in this weird little in-between when I first heard this song. I had just graduated college, just kind of like figuring out adulthood at the time. And I was in that position where I was I was about to get a job, kind of working odd jobs at the time, that whole thing. But this album, when it came out, October 2003, hit me like a ton of bricks. And I've talked about that on the show before, so I won't delve too deep into that. But let's just say it was exactly the album I needed at the time. And this song was a prime example of the sound of something corporate, in my opinion. It's that pop punk riffs, the grungy guitars. I know that they were influenced by. It was right in between like what I was into for years at that point and what I was getting more into at the time. And again, this song "Space" by Something Corporate is a prime example. So I'll be honest, this song I love this song, but it's not even one of my favorite on North. I just want to
yeah,
come out and say it.
yeah.
I love North so much; it's a perfect album through and through. That it can be a song at like the top of the chart for me in term of music overall. Yet it may not be the best song on the album, and it's not. But I always considered it a great album track. It is a single, obviously. We'll talk about that. But it's just another track on an excellent album to me. So it was track 2 on North. It was released as a single about 6 weeks before the album came out, and that was on September 8th, 2003. You'll also find it as track 1 on the Played in Space compilation that came out in 2010. This song did peak at number 37 on the Billboard Alternative Song charts in 2003, which I think is pretty respectable. Steve, how familiar were you with, or how familiar are you now with what was going on rock charts back then?
I didn't pay that much close attention to the charts at any given point, but I do remember. I remember seeing this video on MTV, and so it had a
Hmm.
moment there. I mean, it just really was a part of this band that I really respected. And even though,
Yeah.
like you said, it's not the most amazing Something Corporate song or Andrew, I mean, he didn't write it. I know we'll get into that,
Hmm.
but it's got this punch to it,
Yeah.
and it's cool to see a band that you're a big fan of be successful in ways like that, right?
What I thought was interesting about the charts that year was I looked up the top 5 songs of 2003. It was very hard rock heavy. I'll just put it that way. And so it makes sense why they'd come out swinging with this song "Space" as their first single, because it really was a kind of a hard rock song, even in comparison to the majority of the album. I would say it was comparable to things that we had heard before. But do you remember when you first heard this song? Was it like the sound of Something Corporate you were looking for when you heard it? Do you remember?
I do remember when I first heard it because the first time I heard it was live at
Oh.
a show that they played with 311 in Fresno in July, which I looked up the date that the North came out, and North came out a couple months later.
Hmm.
It was in July of '03. I made the road trip down like 3 hours away with a different friend. And I,
Cool.
again, had a video pass to that show and was able to record a couple of songs. It was supposed to be 3 songs, but the security people didn't stop me from being in the set. So I mean, in the photo pit. So I remember this was the fourth or fifth song of that set. It was like bonus material, and it was this new song that we hadn't heard because we only had Leaving Through the Window at that point. And
Right.
so it was this cool thing where it was like, oh my gosh, a new Something Corporate song was so cool. And my buddy who introduced me to Anders music, we will talk about it a little bit later. He didn't go to that show, so there's some meaning for me in the lyrics of the song that we'll get into, but but it was cool to have that video from that and be able to share that with a friend well before cell phone cameras even
Oh
existed,
yeah.
you know? So
I didn't know people were taking video
yeah,
at
yeah.
concerts in 2003, firstly.
They weren't, and this was one of the cool things about doing this show, even at public access, Steve, is that like for a lot of concerts back then, I was the only person that had video of some of these shows. People were left with
Yeah.
memories, and I had video and still do of a lot of shows from from back then.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean,
That's amazing.
which is pretty cool.
I saw them live in January '05, and I can only tell you what they played because I can look at Setlist FM. Like,
Yeah,
I don't really remember. I remember enjoying myself, and that's kind of the case for me at a lot of concerts. It's like, I remember how I felt. I remember how cool it was. Can I name all the songs? Not really. I don't have any specific memories of it. I remember where it was. I remember being in the crowd, and I remember enjoying it. That's about the extent of it. Sometimes you wish, even in the age of cell phones, and you're like, I don't know if I want to be taking all this video, but then it is nice to have it because it's nice
yeah,
to go back and remember what that sounded like, and that's why I always take at least a clip, if not a full song, one full song or whatever, like just to get a sense of like what that felt like. So it would be so cool to have that from 20 years ago.
yeah, yeah. It was pretty cool.
And it's also interesting to me that you heard this song before it even came out. I have no recollection of when I heard it, whether it was pre-North or when I first put the North CD in my car. But that's cool that you have that very specific memory of hearing this song. Now that kind of gives me an indication of why you wanted to talk about it. And let's get into that just a little bit without going too far into details. So when you reached out and I said, "Hey, which song would you like to do? Would you like to talk about?" I think you came up with Space pretty quick. Why is that?
Yeah, it's because I had that memory of it, right? And I did some exploration myself in terms of the lyrics, and I know we'll get into the lyrics,
Yeah.
but because I had this unique memory of hearing that song for the first time, I know I wanted to do a something corporate song because it was so close to getting to see them again live as as the band, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of their songs you've already covered. So I was like, okay, this song at least I have a memory. I love the chorus. It's just such a live concert song where you can just pump your fist in the air
Oh yeah.
and rock out to it. And so I was like, this will be a good one to talk through.
Definitely. What's interesting about the fact that I've covered a lot of Something Corporate songs already, I was looking at the list of North songs I've covered. This is the 9th on the list, and all that's left is Josh Partington songs on North.
Yeah.
And I didn't put that together until after you suggested Space, and I'm like, oh, I've left the Josh Partington songs until the end. So I don't know. Maybe I'll have to invite him back to talk about one of those other ones that they seem to play a lot recently. All right, I have this quote from Jenna French and the Louisville Cardinal from back in 2003 when North was first released that I want to share. She says, "Every band reaches a point in its career where it must produce a groundbreaking new album. It must be enough, like the other albums, that longtime fans can appreciate it, but different enough to show improvement. For most artists, that CD is the turning point in their musical history, where they could either go forward or stop going altogether. For Orange County-based Something Corporate, 2003's release North was the CD they needed." Ironically, I agree with that. And I'm going to say ironically because it's interesting that they never released anything else after that point. So to call it a turning point in their career, I don't know. But I agree with most of what's in that quote.
I have to agree, and I've been thinking a lot about something corporate recently for obvious reasons, as opposed to Andrew's other music, and it boggles my mind that they were only really relevant and prevalent and in existence for like 2 years, from like '02 to '04, really, I think,
Hmm.
right, and maybe into '05, but it was a
Yeah, they
short, such
toured
a
into early '05.
yeah, because I know he started Jax in mid '05 as well. So
Yep.
so it was just such a short span of time, and they released two full length albums as opposed. Outside of the other stuff, it just feels like a lot packed into a short amount of time. For a band that has
Yeah.
had such an impact on their fans and whose music
Hmm.
has left such a mark in that short amount of time.
It is pretty incredible. So I've heard Josh say, he said it on the episode where I talked to him. I've read it in other interviews of his too, where he says he's kind of glad, and this is way post 2003, when they reunited in 2010, that he's kind of glad they didn't make another album because he feels like they have two great albums to their name. And, if you don't count they call Ready Break a demo album, which is fair. And they call Leaving Through the Window and North are two albums. And he likes the fact that, as he put it, they never released a bad album, which I can agree with him on. They didn't. I think for that reason, I don't think we can ever expect another Something Corporate album. I think they don't want to mess up that legacy, even though they could have made the best next album on earth. We'll never know. I do think it's interesting looking back in history, and I think it's hard not to do as a fan, to look back and say, what if? What if everything in transit had either not existed or been pushed off a couple years? I mean, probably nobody wants that, but bear with me. And, Fire Escape had either never happened or was pushed off another couple of years. And they did make that third Something Corporate album. Is that something you've ever thought of?
Yeah, I mean, I've thought about it, but I didn't dwell on that too long because Everything in Transit is such an incredible album. I mean, you could tell,
True.
right? It's my favorite album of all time. And so I don't look back with it like, what if this had been, had worked out? I know that them packing so much into such a little amount of time. I mean, and this gets at the crux of space, really. They needed space. They toured the world like nonstop, put out 2 albums and toured behind those, and just like burnt that candle at both ends, and to the point where it's no secret the relationship between Andrew and Josh and how challenging that was for both of them, and how they just needed to kind of they didn't expect Something Corporate to really be done in '05 when they separated. They just kind of looked at it as a hiatus, but yeah, I mean, it really just turned out that it was probably best for everybody that they moved on, and Andrew needed to do his own thing, right?
Yeah, and he said as much. So we just hit the 20-year anniversary, and I think that this was a good place to leave it. I think you're right, especially with what we got from Andrew and even the other guys going on with families and careers afterward. And I think they've all like settled into something that really makes them happy as well, it seems. So, and now they can come back and do this thing, which I loved. I love seeing the guys on stage. They have their day jobs, but then they can come and just enjoy this thing that was special 20 years ago, but they can see in the fans' faces it's still special to all these people now. Yeah. I mean, what a feeling that must bring them.
Yeah. Did you see the joy on their face? I mean, just like when you see them playing live, obviously they didn't end with that joy in '05, like that they have being able to come back as real adults now. They were kids in Something Corporate, really. We're young and like just kind of figuring out what life is, and they've all kind of grown up and now can kind of come back to those friendships and with true respect for having given each other that space, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love the way you're weaving in the lyrics of the song to the topic. That's beautiful. Yeah, so the song that we're talking about has Andrew on vocals, obviously, piano and vocals, Josh on lead guitar, William on rhythm guitar, Kevin on bass, Brian on the drums. And Jim Wirt, of course, produced the song as well as the rest of that album. I took this other quote from somethingcorporate.com as well, and this is specifically from Josh, so I thought it was even more relevant. We felt we needed to write an album that's a little bit more serious. I think the last record was more about us trying to find a voice. Now we've found that voice, and this is what it sounds like when we use it. I really like that quote. And again, space being the prime example of that, in my opinion. So I just really feel like this is the sound of Something Corporate when we talk about North, and I've said it before. So let's talk about the concert. So we're going to get into a little bit of live history in the song, but we got to start with the most important thing. So you saw Something Corporate just a couple nights ago in Anaheim, California. What was that like to come back to the Something Corporate show after all of these years?
Oh, it's a nostalgia fest, and I'm a sucker for nostalgia. Like, I mean,
Me too.
There's parts that sometimes you want to leave things in the past, but other times it's just like when something is such a big part of your growth and development, and kind of this band was one of the bands that really helped me develop my musical taste as I went from a lot of music that I would look at now as not very great. Like we're talking Smash Mouth and that sort of thing. That was not very developed, let's say. Like to come back and kind of be a part of that. I mean, and hear these songs that in some cases, Steve, like that you don't think you'll ever hear again, let alone see a band that
Yeah.
this formation. We know Andrew continues to play something corporate songs, and we'll mix them in, and I love that he did that, and I kind of remember that turning point from when he started doing that live, kind of building in songs from his back catalog from other bands, and
Hmm.
it's one thing to see that and kind of and feel it, but it's another thing to kind of be in that room with all the members who made that music, seeing
Hmm.
the joy on their face, and getting to experience that and share it with my daughter who's 13 now, and she appreciates Andrew's music. She's not the biggest fan, but she's
Hmm.
grown up in a sense with it too, and she met him on her fourth birthday, which is pretty cool. And
Yeah.
and to get to share that and kind of have her kind of be a part of that, and that experience for me was really awesome. I mean, really seeing them play Babies of the 80s, seeing them play Constantine,
Yeah.
seeing them play Drunk Girl, like, oh my gosh, like it was
Yeah,
just
some of the you're naming the originals. Those are the original
yeah.
Something Corporate songs, and these guys are performing it like nearly 25 years after they wrote that stuff. It's
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, those are the ones like Babies of the '80s, Drunk Girl. Like I'm like, I'll never hear these songs live, right? Like it's just never
Right.
gonna happen again. And I know that he does the Constantine once a year by contractual obligation at this point, but
Yeah.
but nothing's getting him to play Babies of the '80s except this. So I'll take it.
Yeah, I loved the visuals for that. So I saw someone took a video and put it on YouTube, and I saw the visuals and the performance, of course. And I loved the visuals of all the 80s references like Ronald Reagan and Chuck E. Cheese and, just kids that were obviously in the 80s having fun on a playground, but other pop culture references like Elf that they mentioned in the song and
Yeah.
things like that. So that was cool. Babies of the 80s isn't a song that I have a whole lot of familiarity with. It's not one of those that I even got a chance to download back in the like Napster and LimeWire days. It wasn't on my computer. It wasn't until recent years that I heard that. So I don't really have the nostalgia with the song specifically, but I can appreciate the nostalgia within the song, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. It was on Ready Break, right? Or was it Audio
Yeah,
Boxer? I'm trying to remember which one of
it was
those.
on Ready.
Okay.
I believe it was on Ready Break. Yes, I believe
Okay.
you're right. I didn't have the whole Ready Break until just a few years ago. I had these like different tracks that I downloaded back then, and I was like, where do these all fit? Like I know
Yeah.
they have Leaving Through the Window at the time, and then I got North, and I was like, I don't know, demos, I guess. So I didn't know where all that other stuff fit, and so there was these missing songs like Babies of the '80s and If I Were a Terrorist and Caldecott Tunnel. I never heard until like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, I think I had a burned copy of Ready Break originally, but then but I had a shrink wrapped copy of Ready Break, which I opened in front of Andrew the first time I interviewed him to get him to sign it, and
Wow.
and he's like, "Where'd you get this?" sort of thing, because it was I think
Yeah.
they only printed like 2,500 of them or something.
Uh-huh. Very
Yeah,
limited. Yeah, I can't
yeah,
believe you have that actually. It's kind of funny. I made a like CD display. I'm a CD collector, not as much into vinyl, and I just printed the artwork for Ready Break because I don't have Ready Break. Like who has Ready Break? I didn't
Missed out.
realize I would actually know somebody who has it.
Yeah, yeah.
People there's somebody selling it online. At least there was a couple years ago for like $500. I'm like, "No, that's not happening."
No, no, it's an album, and especially if you're not going to be playing it, like when do you play CDs on anymore, right? So
Right, yeah.
yeah,
No, I don't even have the yeah. I do have a 5 disc changer in the basement. So kind of like some people have their vinyl record player, like I literally have a CD player. But yeah, it's been a couple years even since I've put a CD in there, come to think of it. But
yeah.
now did they open with Space at the show that you saw?
They didn't, but I saw that they did on the 31st. They opened with "I Want to Save You."
Oh, perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I know that's one of the ones they absolutely have to play. Just it's such a fan favorite.
Oh yeah,
And I think it's a favorite in the band actually. That's a good starter too. That's the one I predicted they were going to start the show that I saw. That's what I thought they were going to start with, and they busted into Space instead. So, good choice.
yeah.
So when they played Space, was that nostalgia factor even stronger because you have that video that you took way back in 2003, basically the first time they played it?
It was there, and I'm one of those also that I liked, I'm guilty. I like to record songs at concerts.
Hmm.
I put my phone away as much as I can, but then if it's a
Hmm.
song that I really like, I want to have that video, and I use it for Concert Pipeline a lot also because I interweave concert footage into a lot of the episodes. I didn't record that song though when they played it.
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening to that song a decent amount in preparation for this podcast,
Yeah.
but of course I remembered the first time hearing it.
Just to revisit that topic from earlier one more time, you still have that video from 2003 of Space, right?
You know what's funny is so I went in my closet. I have a rack of mini DV tapes. I have a box of
Mini DV.
I have boxes of SVHS tapes also, which is
Yep, remember that.
yeah, and I'm like they just follow me
Those
around
couple of
and
years.
follow me around. Yeah, exactly. And these are all tapes from concerts and everything. And my mini DV collection is like very organized by date, and so I pull these things out of my closet. And I couldn't find the one from the show that they did with 311. I do still have the one from in January, the first time I saw them, and those are digitized, and I've put those up recently online. But I couldn't find the video, and I was looking for it to try and find it in preparation for this, but no.
So the ones that you put up, can we find them on YouTube at Concert Pipeline?
Yeah, did I put them on YouTube or Instagram? I know I put them on Instagram. I may have put them on YouTube also, but they're around. They're definitely on Instagram.
All right. Well, I'll definitely link your Instagram. I have a link of all your links, I think, so I'll include that in the show notes. So, were there any other? So besides you named "Babies of the '80s" and "Constantine" and "Drunk Girl," were there any other songs that were especially special when you saw them this time around?
I mean, seeing the whole set, and it's just there wasn't really anything missing. They played almost everything from their They have 2 albums, and so filling an hour and a half plus set. I mean, they're going to play almost everything, including the 9.5-minute song. Yes, which they did. I was scratching my head to think of the last time I've seen Constantine live. I don't know when it is because I haven't made it to any of the Dear Jack benefits shows.
Mm-hmm.
I was toying with going this year, but it didn't happen. And
you didn't catch the Dashboard tour last year either?
I did. Wait, no, I did. Okay, so he played Constantine at that, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
I actually have a shadow box of the from the show because I had a photo pass of that one.
Cool.
Yeah, I guess he did play Constantine. Okay, yeah, so I've seen Constantine. So that one wasn't as, I mean, that one's special, but it wasn't.
It's still pretty special, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it is. You can still call it a rarity. I mean, even though he played it on that one tour and he plays it at Dear Jack every year, it's not something he tours on consistently. Like, you go to an Andrew McMahon show and there's those 5 or 6 songs you're going to hear every time, and then sometimes he throws in some deep cuts and other songs, but it's usually not Constantine.
I wanted to ask you while we're talking about Constantine. I think I heard in an episode of your program that you saw something corporate with Stray Light Run on that tour.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, January 2005. Okay.
So then you saw something corporate do the mashup of Constantine and Only in Dreams by Weezer. Do you remember that?
You'd think I'd remember that because Weezer is my other favorite band. I do not remember them doing that. I feel like that would have been a core memory, though, if they did. Interesting.
I have video.
I'd love to see it. If there's a way I can access that online or something, I would love to see that video.
I'll try and dig it up, and it might just be on digital, but I know I have it somewhere.
Okay.
So I'll have to figure out how to get that. But I do have video of that I shot from the balcony backstage.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
No, I didn't know they ever did that, actually. That's news to me. That's so cool.
Yeah, I knew you were a Weezer fan, so...
Only in Dreams is the epic Weezer song, so Constantine being the epic Something Corporate song. So, like I said earlier, they opened with Space when I saw it in Vegas, so that felt like a pretty special moment because the energy was just so alive when that song came on. Again, it was the first song, so probably that was I Want to Save You for you guys, but the energy was just so alive, like the room just exploded when they came out to that song because, the intro had just played, which we've talked about, and then here comes the energy. Everybody, it just felt electric, and everybody was just like singing every word. It also felt special because sometimes I feel like Josh doesn't get enough credit as a songwriter, but I think it's because it's very easy to overlook his work because we usually, just like my podcast, we usually talk about Andrew McMahon's work. These are Andrew McMahon songs. But of course, Josh wrote the song. And I know he didn't write nearly as many that made it to an album as Andrew did, but I think credit is due for him because he wrote Hurricane, he wrote Space. He wrote some of those heavy hitters. They've been playing Only Ashes at all the shows, which, oh, I love that song. Another song I never thought I would hear live.
Yeah.
I love that they were able to open with that. And we had a perfect view of Josh when we saw them in concert a couple months back. And so that was kind of like our view, was like looking at Josh, and then Andrew was just past him. It was really cool to see him rock out to his song and see that electric energy coming back at the band.
He's a good songwriter, and I had a chance to see Firescape, his side band,
Oh,
also
nice.
after Something Corporate was done. I mean, I think he said it in your interview probably as well. I mean, that band fizzled out pretty quick, but
Hmm.
I enjoyed their performance of just songs, and he has one that's really catchy. His Midas Touch, I think it's called, or Midas
Yep.
Touch.
I think that's one of my favorites.
It's not Something Corporate, but it is Josh Partington, and
Hmm.
it would have been cool if that had gone on as well, and he'd been able to do great things with Firescape. But
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things that I don't think he regrets it, because I think it's one of these things that kind of made him into who he is, and was a part of his development.
I mean, obviously it all worked out for him, but he had all these, these experiences. Something Corporate was special. Firescape was its own learning experience, as he put it himself. And now he's done other great things beyond that have nothing to do with music. So, but again, it's so nice that he can revisit that world sometimes. I think I sent you some links. I've got a couple of links I'll include in the show notes of them performing Space in the last 20 years. One I'll include is, of course, the one from the Vegas show, because that is online. They performed it on Jimmy Kimmel back in 2003.
I watched it live.
You watched that live on Kimmel?
Yeah, yeah, I remember. Like, I recorded it on VHS. I remember, like, yeah. I mean, it's crazy how come things come full circle, because I was living in the town I now live in, at the time, and I remember turning it on and watching that performance when it was actually on. So yeah,
I never saw it until recently. When I start digging in and I'm like, oh, let's find performances of Space. And that was one that was out there that was very good quality. And they
yeah.
sounded great. They
Oh
sounded absolutely
yeah.
great on that show. I got to assume when I saw them, since I don't remember what it sounded like when I saw them in 2005, I got to assume that either the Kimmel performance or even the Live at the Ventura performance is probably what I saw of Space. So I don't know if you've noticed that you go to a lot of shows. So I'm wondering your perspective on this. I've noticed, so I've seen this year, some of those, I'm going to call them legacy bands now, right? To us, they're 20 years since they really hit it big. Let's say Yellow Card and Newfound Glory and Something Corporate. There was another one that's escaping me right now. I can't remember. But there are these bands that have been around a long time. And they sounded good back then. But I feel like technically proficient wise, they sound so much better now. What do
Yeah.
you think about that? Do they sound better than they used to, or is it just the technology maybe? I don't know.
I think some do, and there's a nostalgia factor too, right? Where it's part of these
Sure.
bands that you grow up with, and you kind of feel them progress in a sense, but also you love what you love from that moment in time, right? Like getting to
Mm-hmm.
see a show like Everything in Transit's 10-year anniversary show, or for me, another one that was really special was Motion City Soundtrack's Commit This to Memory, like getting to see them play that 10, 15 years later,
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. It scratches this itch, and it's just like takes you in this moment that makes you feel like you're part of something really special, and it's this like big feeling to get to see this thing that you'll probably never get to see again in that environment, right?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment
Yeah.
of it. It just feels so special that it just sounds perfect in that moment, because it's not only the sound of the song you love, but it's also capturing those feelings somehow. Going back to the idea of nostalgia. I think that's a very fair assessment. That's good. So, like we talked about, Josh wrote the song, and this is what he had to say about it. So when he was asked by an interview 20 years ago what the song's about, he says, "There's nothing more frustrating than having somebody love you more than life itself, but can't necessarily even come close to grasping what you're all about at times." I got the sense that he was feeling suffocated in a relationship. And you alluded to something earlier that we'll come back to as well. Intimate relationship, band relationship, we don't really know, but we can definitely delve into the lyrics and talk about that. But feeling suffocated and not really feeling understood. So that could be
Yeah.
anybody in his life.
And I found an Andrew quote. Can I match you a quote about
Yeah,
the song?
definitely. Oh, I love that.
Okay.
Bring it.
Okay. So I was looking for some MTV reference related to this because I know I saw it on MTV and I found an article where Andrew was talking about it.
Hmm.
And he said that this happens when you're on the road for 10 months a year and the other two you spend recording. It's like you become very protective of your personal space. And coming home is almost the most complicated part about touring, to be honest. All the attention suddenly becomes overwhelming. You're not sure if you should feel guilty about wanting or waiting instead spend time in the quietest place possible. So it feels like, even though again, Andrew's not the songwriter, he's the one, he's the front man, he's the one speaking to this song. And it seems
Hmm.
like that there is, band inference in the song as well. I don't know if that's the only thing that Josh wrote it about, but they were in tight quarters.
I had never seen that one before, but it is interesting to hear his perspective. I've heard him talk about Hurricane, but I've never seen or heard him talk about space directly. That was cool to hear. Well, before we get into lyrics, let's talk about the sound of the song. We talked earlier about how this was kind of captured what we were hoping and expecting to feel. Is that fair to say that it captured what you were hoping that Something Corporate would come out with at the time when you heard it?
Yeah, I remember the feeling when North came out as a whole, and maybe it was other influences around me, but like there was this kind of impact. And I know we're talking about space particularly, but to answer your question on a broader scale about North,
Mm-hmm.
here I'm gonna give you another quote because it kind of ties into how I feel about it, and
Yeah.
it's actually when I interviewed Andrew in '05 when he was just starting out Jack's Mannequin. I think I was his first Jack's Mannequin interview. He came to my apartment at San Francisco State, and
Oh, damn, that's cool.
we cleared out the living room and set up three cameras, had wireless lav mics and everything, and I did this whole interview with him there, and I asked him about mixed reaction to North amongst his fans. And he said it's kind of the way it always seems to be with bands. The first thing you hear from a band tends to be your favorite thing. I think Leaving Through the Window is much more of a high school record, and North is much more of a grown up record. And so that really at the time put it into perspective for me in terms of, okay, look, we're progressing here. You're not going to get the same thing. You're not going to get another Leaving Through the
Mm-hmm.
Window. You're going to get something that sounds different and is more developed as all become more developed as musicians, and as a band. So I don't think right away it was what I was expecting, because Leaving Through the Window hit a special mark. It was the first thing I
Mm-hmm.
heard from corporate, but I grew into it, and I really appreciate North a lot, and Space as well as a
Mm-hmm.
part of that. And again, this song is one of those that is just great live because it just pulls out the energy and gets the crowd all pumping their fists into the air, right?
Yeah, it's like a punching sound. I think songs like this, or For Better For Worse, are what placed this pop punk label on Something Corporate, and then Andrew in the longevity of his career, to be honest. So like I think I it's my opinion that Andrew has Josh to thank for that pop punk label. Again, For Better or For Worse, I don't know. Because Josh really wrote a lot more of the, again, going back to Hurricane, Only Ashes, the heavier, more punching guitar song, and then Andrew brought it back to with the piano to create these melodies that made it something more than just a pop punk song. Like we were hearing this style of music from a lot of bands at the time, but it was the piano that for the most part defined Something Corporate, that made them more unique in the scene.
Yeah.
But I think it really was like songs like Space that were like, yeah, this is a pop punk band because Space is a pop punk song. You listen to the rest of North, and yeah, a lot of those songs like individually aren't pop punk songs.
And in some of the more, you sent over a handful of links of performances of these, and some of them I can almost not hear the piano because it's just more acoustic with Josh and Andrew, and
Mm-hmm.
the guitar, the acoustic guitar is more prevalent in those ones. So it almost
Yeah.
feels like it's not like a typical Andrew song where the piano is kind of front and center along with the song.
Yeah, I find the songwriting to be unique, the way they did it, and I'm sure a lot of bands operate the same way, and I just don't know about it. So the fact that they bring their own songs, they would say, Josh would say, well, here's a song I wrote, and they'd probably develop it in the studio, I assume. I don't really know. And then Andrew says, well, here's the songs I wrote, and we're gonna figure these out in the studio. But that's interesting to me because back then, when I was hearing these songs, I just assumed there were five guys or however. I really didn't know the individual band members back then at all. I didn't know who they were or anything. So I assumed it was just the guys in the band came together and wrote these songs together. In the hindsight of it all, it's interesting that this one person came in and said, "Here's my song," and you can kind of tell on Space because it's a guitar song. It's definitely a guitar song.
Yeah.
And then there's piano in certain places, which you could say the same for a lot of Andrew McMahon songs, honestly. But I like that in the second verse of the song, the piano becomes much more clear. It's like
Yes.
it's definitely more of a rock verse, the first verse, and it's still a rock verse, the second verse. But like the piano comes in at certain points to make it something a little bit different.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
The different pieces, so it's a pretty typical like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus, song. But I like that something a little bit different is added in each piece to keep the listener interested. Like the bridge, you got kind of the scream singing in the bridge, which we don't hear from Andrew too often, or even from something corporate in general. So
Yeah, that buildup is pretty incredible. And the things that kind of make it different, I mean, the word "but" in this song just kind of in the chorus is, I mean, it kind of just kind of expands the lyrics, right, into
mhm.
this kind of almost opposite meaning. So I'm interested in kind of what your thoughts are on that, because I've sat with it a little bit, but I'm interested where you land.
So you want to talk lyrics? Are you ready to get into the lyrics?
If you are.
Why don't you kick it off? What lyrics kind of jump out to you immediately in this song, or do you just want to start right from the top? It's up to you.
I mean, so it starts with home, right? And
Hmm.
so we know, if we're looking at this from the perspective of a band that needs space from each other and is on the road all the time, they're not actually physically home very often, but the road was their home for these couple of years that as they kind of exploded, right? And
Right.
so I think that when you have such a close connection with someone, I mean, you're in such tight quarters. You can't always ask for the space that you need, right? You're not comfortable doing that, and I think that might be where some of these lyrics kind of came from. Is like Josh saying, "Hey, okay, we need a little break here. We need some space." And I don't know that Andrew disagreed. I don't know where he kind of landed on it as he's kind of
Hmm.
processing this. I mean, that's kind of the start of the song, and that's kind of where I
Yeah.
start with it.
Something you said earlier helped me get a better picture of what this first line is getting at. Home is this the quiet place where you should be alone. And I never thought about it that way until you said what you said earlier, talking about them being on the road 10 months a year and then coming home to record for those 2 months and then just going right back out. And that being like Andrew said, the hardest part of it all. I love the next line though. Is this where the tortured and the troubled find their own? That's one of my favorite lines of the song. I've never had any reference point for what that meant to me or what that may have meant to the band. But how do you think that fits into the relationship dynamics in the band?
I can only take from that it's kind of torturous to, in a sense, to kind of have these feelings of needing this space with someone that you really care about, right? And I mean, there's parts of this that as I'm kind of breaking down this song and thinking about it, that I relate to kind of a personal situation of my own that I'm kind of going through now, even with the close friend who introduced me to something corporate, where
Mm-hmm.
we're kind of on a friend break, and we kind of were at the time where I brought back the video of the band playing this song too. I remember sitting in the back seat of his car at a break. We worked at a fast food restaurant together, and like he was watching the video with the other friend that I went to, kind of in the front seat of this concert that we recorded, but I was in the back seat, and we needed some space, right? But I'm
Mm-hmm.
kind of I don't know. I have an addictive personality of sorts. I'm not an addict or anything, but I mean, just in terms of being close to a couple of really close friends. And so sometimes, I don't know, maybe I'm a little too overbearing, but I can kind of imagine that sort of similar situation. And
Mm.
there's torture, like someone you really care about. How do you tell them that you need space?
That's really interesting that you brought that up because I told the story to my wife fairly recently. We were talking about it, just something that we talked about unlocked a core memory. There was a time, and it was more 2002-ish, but that I had to basically break up with. It wasn't just a friend break. I had to break up with a friend. I had to say enough. I have to walk away. It was really interesting. It's still, I've never had that type of interaction besides an intimate relationship with anyone else in my life, but to go to somebody that I've been friends with for years and say, I'm not going to be friends with you anymore, and here's why. I'm glad that didn't happen to the guys in Something Corporate. I'm glad it wasn't permanent, but for me, in my case, it had to be, and it doesn't sound like it was for you guys either. But it sounds like you have kind of that open relationship where you can let each other know when you do need a break. Would that be accurate?
In this most recent time, it didn't work out that cleanly. I'll just say, like,
Okay.
it was pretty difficult for me, but I'm in a better place with the whole thing now. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
It's hard.
yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, I don't
Huh.
text or call him unless he reaches out, but our kids are friends still, and trying to maintain that and what that looks like.
Yeah.
It's a weird situation that I can't even say I completely understand right now. When I look at these lyrics, and I kind of relate them to this situation. Like, I look at them from his perspective and kind of what he's trying to say. He's, kind of building the separation into our friendship, or what was our friendship. I don't know. I saw him today for 5 minutes, just because, I mean, of a crabbing situation. I was out crabbing, and he went with a
Mm-hmm.
different friend and whatever. And again, it's not the same level of friendship where we would talk to each other on the phone every day, or text,
Mm-hmm.
or anything along those lines. So
Right.
it's a
More
different
in passing.
dynamic. Yeah, and I don't know what it'll look like in the future, but
I see.
I can find meaning in these lyrics in that sense, personally.
Were you personally connecting to these lyrics in the same way 20 years ago, or is it more of like, as an adult you can look back and say, oh, now I understand this, or were you interpreting it back then the same way?
That's a really great question, because I didn't, when I chose this song, I didn't choose it because of that.
Mm-hmm.
I had to kind of take myself back to that place. And so I found this connection both back in the past and in current in this song now, more now than then. I don't remember kind of connecting this to this song through that situation. We were so young. I mean,
Yeah.
it was half my life ago, and there was natural space because he moved down to San Diego for a while, and I mean, all the way down the state, and I mean, and then it just came back naturally over time, but it did need space. And so I didn't have that connection then, but I can see a lot better now what was then, and we're a similar situation now with the same friend.
It's always pretty interesting, cool to me. I have this song I've been listening to for all these years, in this case, 20
Mm.
years. And I may interpret it differently now than I did back then. And actually, these conversations help me to do so. And I really enjoy that aspect of podcasting about Andrew's music, in this case, Josh's music, being able to kind of get a new sense of these lyrics or find new meaning in them. But the way I interpreted these lyrics back then, and still do kind of these days, is more of like an angsty young kid, like for me, very surface level, just like, yeah, man, I need space. Like, yeah, you crowd me, sort of thing. Like, totally surface level. Like, I never thought too deeply about these lyrics, interestingly. And so I like this different way of thinking about it. And honestly, even knowing all I know about the Something Corporate, which isn't everything, but even knowing what I know about the Something Corporate band members dynamic, I never really thought about this song, emoting feelings about each other.
And a lot of songs you think of in a like a platonic, like relationship between a partner, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, but this one, I mean, it seems like there's more, right? It seems like
Mm-hmm.
there's more to it, and that it's about their friendship as well and their dynamic.
And so the lyrics that always jumped out at me, like when I think of space, I think of the chorus. And so it's very easy to sing along to. It's very easy to, for me to interpret, at least at a surface level. Like I said, you're crowding me. So I never put too much thought into the lyrics of the verses, but I really do enjoy them. Let's just keep going. So I don't know, but I can tell this isn't you. Your cover's blown. oh no, don't you dare hang up this phone. Yeah, it could be a relationship with anybody really, but it could be a business relationship, a partnership, a intimate relationship, whatever. And then we get to the chorus. I do like in the second verse, he makes a reference to outer space, which I think is really ironic and funny.
He can't not make a reference to outer space when it's a space song, right? A song titled
Right.
Space, right? Like, there's got to be throw an astronaut in there or stars or something. There's got to be something here,
Yeah,
even though it's not an Andrew written song. Josh knows it. He knows
exactly.
it. You know, like knows what
That's
he
where the
likes.
irony lies there, that it's not an Andrew song, yet we're still getting the outer space references. And I had to think about it for a sec. But obviously, this wasn't the first time that the band referenced outer space. But it was pretty cool. Yeah, like we're talking about physical space, but getting the outer space reference still. I do enjoy that.
One other cool note that I read actually just before we met today was that the video for this, they had a lot of people come to them with ideas of outer space, right, with spacemen and that sort of thing. And it's like, no, it's not about that.
Yeah,
You know,
most definitely not. And I think that would have taken away too much from the theme of the actual song. Some more lyrics that I really appreciate is, and I don't know if it's the delivery or if it's the actual words that he sings or scream sings, but I do like the bridge. These padded walls and TV screens, sometimes they make me want to scream. And then he screams. I love that part of the song, but again, I think it might be more in the delivery, but I do like the words, though, that he sings.
yeah.
Maybe kind of getting at monotony, padded walls, I'm going nuts, TV screens. It just all makes me want to scream. Or maybe he's talking about the studio, being in the studio.
Could be their pattern. Well, that's a good reference. It could be the pattern walls of the studio. Yeah, I like where you went there.
Never would have thought until you said what you said earlier, and I'm like, that could be a studio.
It could be very well, right?
Anything else on lyrics that you want to talk through?
I just like the second half of that chorus where it repeats itself, but it adds in the word "but." Hey, give me space, but I can't breathe, which is to me just again feels opposite. But it seems like you're really kind of struggling with this relationship in the sense that you care about the person. You don't want to have these feelings, but and it just kind of flips the original lyrics of "Give me space so I can breathe" on its head a little bit. Do you feel that way about it? Where do you see that?
Yeah, I like that call out because give me space, but I can't breathe. Give me space, but I can't sleep. Yeah, I never thought about it that way, actually. But yeah, I get that note too, that you want it to work so badly. You're in this partnership or this relationship with somebody, and you want it to work so badly, but you just can't seem to make it work. So the buts are interesting. I see what you mean now. That and I never put too much thought into that one. Give me just 1 inch, I swear that's all I need. That's really like a desperate call for anything right
Just
now.
anything.
Just give me anything.
Yeah, yeah. Like I'm desperate to just step away, even a little bit, right?
That particular line sounds desperate to me. It's an interesting, different way to look at this song, to think about maybe two band members who are butting heads a little bit, or maybe more than that. Maybe it was all of them. Anything else on lyrics you want to talk about?
No, I think that pretty much covers the lyrics. I'm good there.
Do you have a particular favorite part of the song?
I mean, the hey is the favorite part because
is it really? Okay.
I mean, just because it's just it takes you to that live place. And I'm all about if you haven't learned about me, I'm all about the live concerts and
for
live
sure.
shows.
I've heard you talk about concerts. Like, yeah, for sure. That makes perfect sense to me. I wouldn't have predicted the hey being your favorite part, but once you said that, it now makes sense. Like, yeah, that's the crowd participation part. That's the energy in the live audience. For me, it's really, and I mentioned my favorite part earlier. For me, it's that in the second verse when the piano comes in, because it changes it up ever so slightly from the first verse. And I love when songs do that. I love when, there's a consistency throughout a song. I appreciate that every time. But I also appreciate when they change things slightly throughout the song to keep your ear interested. And that's what those piano notes do in the second verse for me. Let's talk about other versions. Did you get a chance to listen to that IMX acoustic version on YouTube?
I did. That was the one where I think there were just a couple of other people in the crowd, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it definitely was. Again, it made it more guitar driven in my perspective. But it's just, I mean, when you see the videos, going back to that time frame where, I mean, Andrew had the shaggy hair almost covering his eyes. It brings back those memories of seeing him in that younger phase, right? And so,
Yeah.
and when Josh was a part of the band, and you also linked to Live at the Ventura,
Hmm.
and Bobby was in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that Bobby was in the Live at the Ventura. I didn't remember that.
Yeah, because that was mid '04, so it was right after William left.
And I was at Bobby's first show with something corporate and have a set list from that one actually. Yeah, it just again reminded me just how quick things went with something corporate and kind of
Yeah.
transformed even to when in '04 Bobby was already took over at that point.
Yeah, and I do think about the slight rotation in band members. There wasn't much movement, but it was slight. But yeah, it was such a short time frame. So just those couple years, it started with, I think his name was Ruben
Ruben.
Hernandez at the very beginning. But I don't even think I don't think he did any recording for Leaving Through the Window. I mean, at least the album notes don't show that. And then it was William Tell, but through from Leaving Through the Window through right through North. But it's almost like right after they recorded North, and I think the beginning of that tour or something, he was leaving. And so I found an article, it was like February of '04 maybe, that it was official. They said, yeah, William's leaving, now we know. And it was a very short time that these guys were making these albums and that they were all together making music. But it was such an important moment in time, though, for them and for us. What I liked about that IMX performance was, and by the way, when I watched that, I had forgotten about the other version I had that I sent you, which I'll come to next. I was like, oh, that's a unique way to hear that song, where it's just basically acoustic guitar and piano. But the thing I liked best about that IMX video, and I'll share this in the show notes, by the way, is that his voice, I don't think ever sounded so good. Andrew's
Yeah.
voice sounded like spot on, and that's the thing I loved most about that performance.
I noticed he had a wedding ring on in that video too, and I'm
Oh,
questioning
weird.
that. Yeah, I'm questioning that too because we know he wasn't married at that point yet,
No.
but it was on the ring finger, and now it made me want to go back and find out. Did he like how long he had that, or what the deal is with the wedding ring? But anyway, that's just
Interesting.
nerdom.
He was wearing it to show his
Hmm.
commitment, I guess, to his girlfriend. That's pretty early. Like that, he was like 21,
Yeah.
wearing a wedding ring and not obviously not married. I also shared with you the Down the Alley EP version, which is also acoustic, so it's basically just the audio. I had trouble tracking that down a couple years ago. Like nobody, well, that I knew had it. Did you have the Down the Alley EP?
I didn't until you sent it. I didn't even know what the Down the Alley EP was. Where is that from?
So I think it was a digital only release, maybe on iTunes from around that time, maybe 2004. And I'm guessing right now. I'm pretty sure it was 2004. And it had Punk Rock Princess, I Woke Up in a Car, 21 and Invincible, and Space, all acoustic. I enjoyed that version a lot, and I actually kind of forgot it existed. Like I said, I was calling up the video, and I was like, oh, wait, I have an acoustic version of that on my computer.
Yeah, it's interesting when I mean, these things that you, even as a big fan, like, didn't, like, how did I miss that existed, right? I mean, and
Mhm.
I know I sent you the live at the Fillmore album.
At the Fillmore, which I
Yeah,
never heard. Yeah.
I almost went to that show, but I ended up being down south, so I think I saw him like a day or two before that on that same tour.
Hmm.
I mean, but I remember that album coming out, and man, it was very limited release, physical
Yeah.
album. But no one hears about. You can't really find that anywhere. It just kind of existed.
That's another one that you can buy for a whole lot of money online.
Yeah,
But again, I'm not going to invest in that. So I appreciate you sharing the tracks with me.
sure, happy to.
So let's briefly talk about the music video. What are your thoughts?
Again, I go back to my original viewing of the music video, and that it just happened. It was on MTV, and I'm like, it was just felt like this power punch video.
Hmm.
Reading the MTV article about the video, I got to kind of experience it again and kind of pay closer attention to it and realize that,
Uh-huh.
I mean, all the different locations where they actually physically went out and took these monitors that were stood in
Yeah.
columns into different places. And Andrew was quoted as saying that they were like getting chased down because they were putting these in places that they weren't supposed to be, and that sort of thing. I would say that my favorite part of the video, and I don't know if you caught this, probably about 20 seconds before the end of the video, there's a part where Andrew's singing into the mic, and the mic is it comes disconnected, or it is disconnected from the XLR cable, and he just was like, well, whatever, did a shrug sort
They
of
didn't
thing.
even redo the
Like,
take. They're
they
just
didn't
like,
even redo
whatever.
the take. They just tossed it in, the like kind of an outtake of him, pretend singing into this microphone that wasn't even connected. I don't know. I thought that was
No,
pretty
I
awesome.
didn't catch that. I'm gonna go back and watch that now for sure.
Yeah.
I like the video. It definitely reminds me of late 90s, early 2000s music videos. Like it's very like the coloring, the kind of style of it. But yeah, I was pretty sure those monitors were legit placed out in a city, and I didn't read that. I thought it was pretty authentic looking. So interesting that they did that. They went up these different locations. Was that so? What was that around the LA area? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, all around Ventura, like the Ventura Beach or something, I think. And I
Uh-huh.
mean, they did one shot in front of the Hollywood sign. And some of these shots are only like a second or two. And I think of like the work that went into like hauling all these
Yeah.
monitors, for like 2 seconds in a video. But they can't redo the shot of him singing, into
Yeah.
the mic so yeah.
They spent too
It's
much money moving those
yeah.
monitors around. They just couldn't afford that a few more minutes of digital tape. So
Yeah.
yeah, they used to spend so much money on music videos. It's incredible. I've heard these stories from musicians, and I'm sure you've talked to a lot of them about these sort of things, that like the amount of money that used to be thrown into promotion such as music videos, because MTV was the way to get seen. I like the video. Honestly, I didn't watch the video. It's interesting to me that you said that you saw it back then. I wasn't really watching music videos in the early 2000s for whatever reason. I don't know. It was, you had to go to MTV and actually watch the videos. Whereas like in the last decade or so, I started getting more into watching videos again. Like, oh, I want to go see, oh, there's a music video for this. I want to go see it. And so what I've done in these last few years since I've had this podcast is I've chosen not to watch the videos of the songs until I actually cover the song, until I'm ready to cover the song. So there's
Yeah.
still an Andrew McMahon music video I have not watched.
It's a cool way to, kind of ingest the video part of the music, I mean,
Yeah. But yeah, the guy who directed that video, I found out. So I was curious. So I asked Google and found out that Marcus Siega directed that video. And I looked at what else he directed. Two of the most popular Blink-182 videos ever. Two of the most popular All-American Rejects videos. And actually two very popular Weezer videos as well. Island in the Sun and Hash Pipe.
nice.
All from those like same couple of years. It was like
Yeah.
he must have been the go-to guy for those couple of years. So
You want an
um,
MTV video, you're getting it from him, right? So,
yeah, it seemed like it anyway. All right, any final thoughts about space? Anything that we missed talking about?
no, I think we're ready to give space some space.
Yeah, I think we're ready to call it on that. I'd like your opinion. What do you see as the future of something corporate? In your opinion, are we going to get more shows? Is there going to be like a mini tour or some more one-offs like we had in Anaheim and in Las Vegas? Or is it the cruise next year and then that's it? What do you think?
So your guess is as good as mine, but I would say the cruise, and then they're going to shelf it for a few years, I think.
Hmm.
But they've rebuilt their friendships to the point where they're comfortable being in a room together and practicing, and
Yeah.
for some shows. I don't envision new music from something corporate
No.
on the in the future. I think it's still kind of this nostalgia piece as much for us as it is for them. I mean, it's like a piece of their childhood and getting to go back and visit high school friends, but that they're high school friends that you were in this relationship with, this contractual relationship with,
Hmm.
ultimately, I mean, where they became something corporate
Hmm.
to them, where they had to sell this product of their band. And now they're at a point, there's no obligation for them
Right.
to do anything. There's no I mean, if they want to, they can make a song, but I don't think any of them have time to do this. You know, you got a couple lawyers in the
No.
band and
Yeah.
people doing other
They're busy
things,
with
and
other things. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And there's like, oh, I'll write a song, but no one else. I mean, Josh is like, you can't afford me, so no. I think some one-off shows will be in the future.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, and if Andrew writes a song, and he said as much. It's an Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness song because he's in Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness. He's not in something corporate anymore. He's something corporate, something that they do for fun, and they can get together and do, and that's amazing. I don't have any intel either, but it's all speculation. I assume there'll be some one-offs throughout the maybe 2024. I guess it's wishful thinking. I'm hoping for, like, being that I live in the Midwest, I'm hoping for some maybe a Midwest, like a Chicago or a Columbus, and then maybe a New York City or a Philly or a Boston or something like that. Maybe a sideshow leading into the cruise down in Florida. I don't know.
Hey, you're getting the cruise though. You're going to be on the cruise, right? So
I will be on that ship. Like when I saw that and I was like, all three bands in one place for a long weekend. I have to make it happen. So, unfortunately, my wife is, accepts this, and she's coming along for the ride. She's a fan too, but
yeah,
that part works out. But yeah, so I'm excited about the cruise, that I get to see something corporate again, hoping for some one-off shows. I completely agree with you. There's no reason for them to record more something corporate songs. I mean, do I want them to go re-record all those demos? Heck yeah. Like, please go back and re-record Babies of the 80s and Ben Franklin's Kite and If I Die and Caldecott Tunnel. I would love that, but they have no reason to do that. Like, there's no...
They'll call it SoCo's version, right?
Yeah, yes, the something corporate version. Now they own the rights, so they don't have a good enough reason to do that. So they can leave the legacy alone and celebrate it every couple of years, like you said. Like, come back in a few years after 2024 and maybe do another one-off show or something. That I can live with all that. So I agree with Josh's idea of protecting the legacy of the two really solid albums they made, and I completely respect that decision.
It was a moment in time, and I don't know how they would top what they've done. They left their mark. So
yeah. Well, thanks, Steve, so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it. So where can people go listen to Concert Pipeline?
I mean, the best place is YouTube in a lot of cases, because a lot of times there's concert video there, and I don't know. I love
Cool.
the concert video. I love shooting the concert video and being live there. But it's YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, probably other places too. But those are the big ones you can get on any devices, and Instagram, Facebook, all at Concert Pipeline.
I'll list your links in the show notes, and I didn't realize that you had videos on YouTube of the concerts that you go to, so I'll be checking those out. If you can find it, maybe we'll see that 2003 version of Space that was played in July 03, but I don't know. I won't hold my breath for that one. I understand, like, that's again, it's a moment in time. Well, thanks everybody who listens to the show. I really appreciate it. Really, once again, appreciate having Steve on the show. Steve, this was fun.
It was fun too.
Love getting together, talking about with other Andrew fans and Josh Partington fans as well. And it was really cool to hear your story of, like, the times you've seen them back in the day and just seeing them a couple of days ago again and kind of reliving that and getting to do that with your daughter. How cool is that?
Pretty cool. Steve, I want to thank you also for doing this podcast. I think I was aware of it, but I didn't go dive into it until recent months. And I mean, I find myself learning about some, like really diving into the lyrics. I don't dive into the lyrics super deep too often. And so getting to understand kind of the perspective, or at least you and other fans understanding of the perspective of what, where Andrew's head was at. It brings this new meaning to the song and kind of new vision for me. So thank you for doing the podcast.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. I appreciate that, because that's what I get out of this is talking to other fans. Well, I'll be checking out more of your episodes as well, and you've got quite a back catalog. So, well, again, thanks for joining me, and I'll just end it with this quote: "Is this where the tortured and the troubled find their own? I don't know.